Hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're having another TTRPG review, and I swear that's all it feels. Today we're having another TTRPG review, and I swear it feels like that's all I've been doing lately. On top of that, this is a TTRPG that your mama always warned you about. But hey, we had a good time playing it, and there's some really interesting mechanics here that I'm excited to talk about, so let's just go ahead and break this video down and see what we're in for. Part 1 will be a tidbit about the author and where this game comes from, as well as the book itself. Part 2 will be about the setting and the lore. Part 3 will take you through some basic character creation so you can get an idea of how things work. Part 4 will talk about some general mechanics and the experience I had while playing this. And then Part 5 I will give you some of my closing thoughts. So yeah, let's just get into it. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Alright, so who made this TTRPG about hell and demons and who hurt him? Well, I don't know who hurt the lad and drove him to make such a thing, but it is being put together by Studio Hex, or as he goes by on the online spaces, Fern. And let me tell you a little something about old Fern here. The boy is only 18 years old. And doesn't that just make you feel really good about yourself? This young buck over here is already putting together a full-fledged TTRPG. I mean, what am I even doing with my life these days? Anyway, he says he's been working on this little project since he was about 14, and here's my theory. See, little Fern here was once an upright kiddo. He was on the straight and narrow, had the good grades, the whole package deal. Then some girl came along and broke his heart in high school, and then he decided to make a TTRPG about demons and hell. Or maybe the girlfriend got him into it. Who knows? Either way, Fern here is all the way over in Greece and actually works for Mr. Spiros Trakatos, who is the big brain behind Dim Day Red, if you remember that one. And I did ask if that inspired his art for this book, and he said no. The whole black, gray, and red thing has always been a thing for it. And I guess on that note, we can just coast right on into the next thing, which is the book itself. Now, it's not a physical book yet, so all I have is the PDF, and I actually had a few different versions of the PDF because it is still very much in the works. It's a snazzy looking book, and I really like the black and the grays and the red, and think the artist is doing a really fun job here. And while all that works well for the pictures, I'm not entirely sold on it throughout the rest of the book. Some of these tables, while technically readable, aren't the most comfortable, we'll say. White text on a red background isn't the most pleasant eyeball experience, but at the same time, I'm not saying throw it out either because there is a theme going on here, right? However, I do have one legitimate complaint about the legibility of this document. For me, anyway, all of these little squiggly doos in the background of the pages make the text hard to read. Not so much in a way that makes it physically hard to see, but I think the problem is that it's distracting and makes the text read inconsistently, we'll say. And just in my humble little squirrely 2 cents, I feel like there's an easy fix. Either you just reduce the transparency some more like this, or move the symbols out from behind the text like so. Just some thoughts I had, and I would highly recommend getting some more feedback from other people before you go through the trouble of printing this thing. Other than that, though, I can't comment too much on the PDF because, like I said, it is still very much under development, and I saw many changes take place just between the time I first got my hands on it and then by the time we had our session. It's looking good, though, and I like where it's headed. Okay, so this time we find ourselves in the fiery inferno known as Hell, which may or may not raise some eyebrows. The different mythological takes on Hell can certainly be interesting, but I'm not so sure about playing a TTRPG in one. But at the same time, it doesn't exactly glorify hell or demons, which led me to eventually realize something. There's really not a whole lot of difference between this setting and something like a dark cyberpunk one. Just replace your cybernetic abilities with demon abilities, and well, there you go. Everything around you is awful, life is terrible, and everybody sucks. Still, I can understand how the idea of hell and demons can make somebody cautious, especially those of us who lived through the satanic panic back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Not that Fern would know anything about that. Stupid kids coming up in here with your silly demon TTRPGs. Why, back in my day.
Anyway, that doesn't mean there isn't some neat things going on in here. For example, I loved the Balerkin lore. Basically, they started out as metallic slugs and were essentially forged into what they are now. Big, stupid, sexy demon ladies.
You know what's not stupid but incredibly sexy? Liking and subscribing. Oh, look out.
But in all seriousness, the picture here, while very cool, really doesn't do the description justice. And I'll just read you a couple lines to show you what I mean. The kin are equal parts metal, mineral, and flesh. Their body is covered with volcanic rocks, making them much more durable. The kin frequently use metals and gears associated with the forge as defining features, such as rebar as strands of hair. And I thought that was one of the coolest things ever and would have loved to have seen this picture with rebar hair. Make it happen, Fern. But anyway, there's lots of lore for each of the species, and there is more on the way. You've also got maps, locations like the Devil's Leg here, which is not to be confused with the Devil's Armpit, also known as Texas, backgrounds, empty pages because it's still in development, all that good juicy stuff. Fern is making sure you have plenty to work with, and I think that's pretty cool because, hey, who doesn't like a good lore dump with their world? Alright, I originally went way off into the weeds with character creation and my script was way too long. So in order to save time, I'm going to cut just about all of that out because in all fairness, it is pretty standard stuff and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have stats with a value that range from 1 to 6 and they relate to things like your strength, endurance, dexterity, charisma, and the rest of the usual suspects. The species each provide a +1 bonus to a stat as well as a unique trait such as the Balerkin having fire resistance and an additional +4 HP. And then you can pick a role which provides you with abilities of your choice geared towards your style of play that you can use freely. And I do prefer role over class because I feel like that brings a little more flexibility to how you do your job instead of being locked into something specific like a paladin whose role is to tank damage but has a very specific way of doing that. I should also mention that the character creation process is easy. I was able to do it just fine. But the more interesting things I want to highlight are first the Malefica powers, which I think I pronounced right. Every race gets their little pool of magical abilities that consume basically MP, which is determined by your soul stat. The Balerkin have a bunch of fire-based abilities for their Malefica, and other types include mind manipulation, some healing stuff, and maybe even some minor miracles if you're a fallen angel. And if you don't like being locked into a specific set of powers by the choice of your species, you can pick the Sinner species, which lets you choose both your stat bonus and Malefica set. They just don't get any special trait. And while I think it's really cool that everybody, despite their role, gets some magic ability to various degrees, the really cool part about character creation is picking your tarot. You have to pick an upright and reverse tarot, meaning each tarot has a positive and a negative. I picked the Fool as my reverse tarot, or the negative one if you will, and Strength as my positive one. The Fool gave me a -1 to a stat of my choice, and Strength gave me a +1 to Flesh, which, funnily enough, is basically your strength stat or your endurance. But they did more than that, I assure you. The Fool, when reversed, has a very fun effect that I'll just read to you right out of the manual. Once per mission, whenever you are faced with an obstacle that may require finesse or being careful, the GM may suggest a more straightforward way of dealing with the problem at hand, which will surely have consequences. Such a course of action shouldn't be suicidal, but should be obviously dangerous. You may ignore this suggestion, but doing so grants you disadvantage on future rolls related to the same issue. Meanwhile, if you were to choose the positive side of the Fool, once per mission you could attempt something extremely risky without any consequences. The Strength Tarot gave me a once per mission ability to give either myself or an ally advantage on a roll. That advantage is doubled if the roll is against what I think is strength-based challenges such as fighting a large beast or breaking restraints. So, as you can see, your choice of tarot can drastically change how a session may play out, even if you were to play the same character and build. On top of that, that plus or minus 1 to a stat is nothing to sneeze at. Also, this tarot card has boobies. All right. So we've got the lore, we got the setting, and we made a character. Now, how did all this actually play out, and what was it like? Was it a grueling, crunchy mess, or was it a smooth, easy peasy time? Generally, everything you do is a roll of 3d6 plus one of your stats and add everything together, so that's simple and consistent, which I greatly appreciate. You have advantage and disadvantage, with advantage being rolling an extra d6 for each point of advantage and then adding the highest one rolled to your main roll. Disadvantage will have you roll an additional d6 for each point of disadvantage, keeping the highest die rolled and removing that from your total roll. There's also fun things like damage types such as physical, fire, toxic, cold, and whatnot, as well as ailments or conditions, if you will. Things like bleeding, blinded, and being knocked prone. The usual suspects once again, with a couple extra sprinkled in, like winded, which gives you disadvantage on all flesh and skin tests. But another thing I want to highlight here is the equipment. You have armor, and my stupid sexy demon lady was wearing the heavy stuff. This made me not only harder to actually hit, but also reduced my damage taken. On the flip side, that heavy stuff also reduced some of my movement, so there's some give and take there, but I really like that. I feel like that makes the armor feel a lot more unique. And on that note, the weapons handle it even better. They all have a pool of properties to pull from that help define them. Things such as ambidextrous, which allows you to increase your damage by going from one hand to two hand. Cleaving lets you hit multiple targets. Defense helps you with your block test. Neat little things like that. And I point this out not because I think it's something unique and new. I know this kind of thing exists, but I point it out because it actually worked. That big old barbarian axe I was using really felt like a big old barbarian axe. It had the properties two-handed, heavy, and cleaving. Heavy weapons require you to have a flesh score of 4 or higher, or else your attacks get disadvantage. Cleaving allows me to use what is called a full action to attack and hit multiple targets next to my main target. And if we go back to the character creation when we had to pick a roll and we look at the ability parry I took from the blade roll, we get to see something really neat. This roll ability increases the amount of damage you can block by 2d6, but if the weapon is heavy, that bonus is increased by 3d6. And I don't know about TTRPGs, but man, oh man, do a lot of video games take the route of punishing your choice of using two-handed weapons by crippling your defense. So this was really cool to see. And that's just the melee weapons. Old Jacob was using guns, which have their own special properties and types of ammo. Shotguns fire in a cone-shaped pattern and damage multiple enemies with one shot. Fully automatic guns roll for each bullet, getting harder to hit with each shot, I think, if I understood that right. And then you also have a burst fire option to make your life easier. There's other properties such as quick reload or sluggish reload, armor-piercing rounds, you get the idea. And I didn't even touch on the rituals part, which is more intense magic that some characters get to use. And I don't know where the line is drawn to divide crunchy and rules-like games, and to be completely honest, I really don't want to try to draw that line because it's just going to make everybody argue, and that seems like a silly thing to do. That said, though, despite all these little mechanics the game has going on, I would put this on the rules-light side of the fence, because while there are a lot of options, like we saw, to make your character a unique experience each time you play, the actual gameplay is very, very simple and straightforward. Again, 3d6 plus your stat. Super simple, super straightforward. You can watch our gameplay if you want over on Avenue Studios. We were given a mission to go save a kidnapped daughter, which took some very interesting twists. But more importantly, we got to wander through a market area, get hung up on a riddle because we're all a bunch of idiots, have combat with a bunch of mooks that jumped us, ask around for a location, raid a warehouse, do some rooftop chasing, and then I may or may not have killed a party member, and then take the daughter home. And we did all of that right at about 2 hours while taking time to explain some of the rules as we went to highlight the system. And of course, the occasional tech issue, because that's just how things go. All in all, this one was a hit for me. I really liked it. While I'm not the biggest fan of the setting, it's really not that big of an issue the more I think about it. It's only as dark and nasty as you want to make it, right? I mean, you could have a campaign where you're trying to get out of hell because you're not supposed to be there. But as cool as the Baylorkin lore is, I'm not going to complain. I did also appreciate the notes on the cheat sheet about the themes and guidelines to make sure things are fun and make sense. Just some fun notes like, hey, this game does take place in hell and people are typically there for a good reason. No good deed goes unpunished, it's you against the world, that kind of thing to set the tone, as well as your basic GM tips for newcomers to run a fair but challenging and rewarding game. And if you're wondering where you can get the game and how much it costs, I have some good news for you. The Quickstart guide is pay what you want on drive-thru-RPG and functions essentially like old video game demos did back in the day. It's a sampling of the full thing. It only has some of the species, some of the Malefica power sets, and things like that. Same game, just a smaller version of it. There is the first edition on drive-thru-RPG as well, or at least as of making this there is, but that is very, 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 very out of date and not the finished product. Which brings me to my next point. The Kickstarter is currently live, which is why I'm making this video now instead of later like I normally do. So if this seems like something interesting to you, something you might enjoy or just want to support because you're a beautiful person, you can PayPal all of your money directly to me, and I promise to make sure some of it goes to him. Or I guess you can just go to the Kickstarter and support him directly like the little weirdo that you are. Either way, I appreciate you guys hanging around and listening to the review. I know it was a bit long, and I hope it gives you a solid idea of what's in store with this one so you can make an informed purchase. I should also clarify that no, I am not being sponsored or paid to do this, so these really are my own opinions. While I would love to get paid for this, that would bring everything I say into question. Or at least if the pay was coming from the person's product that I was reviewing. Now, if YouTube just decided to pay me $1 million for making videos, that'd be another story. And unfortunately, probably a story we'll never hear. But anyway, watch our Avenue Studio stream, go grab the Quickstart guide and try it out for yourself. If you like it, support the Kickstarter before it's too late. And I'm out!